Hello, today I'm going to talk to you about chemical and physical changes and help you identify the difference between the two. All right, so a chemical change is one in which the actual chemical species change form. So you end up with different chemicals at the end than you had at the beginning. All right, whereas a physical change, the form could change, or you might mix things together. It might look a little different, but in the end, if you were to zoom into the microscopic or submicroscopic atomic level, you'd still have the same chemicals that you started with, all right? So some examples of physical changes are melting. Any phase change is going to be a physical change, so that it also would include boiling or freezing or evaporation, all of those. All right, anytime that all of that you're doing is breaking the thing apart, so like chopping wood or shredding paper, those are going to be physical changes. And mixing is always going to be a physical change, unless you notice some sort of indication that a reaction happens when you mix. All right. Examples of chemical changes, you've seen them all around you. Burning things is always a chemical change. Rotting or digesting food is a chemical change. Fireworks are one example of a chemical change. And mixing baking soda and vinegar would be another example of a chemical change. All right, so let's go through some examples and see if we can identify chemical versus physical changes. So if we boil water, that is just changing phase. We're going from the liquid state to the gas state, all right? And so that is going to be a physical change, so I will circle that one. All right, making fresh lemonade, all right? When we make lemonade, we're just mixing lemon juice and water and sugar, basically. So we're just mixing things together. There's no indication that there's a chemical change taking place. It's still the same ingredients. We just put them all together. So that's going to be a physical change. All right, when we bake a cake, all right, we have to put it in the oven. The substance looks quite different from when we started. It changes from a liquid to a solid, but other things change too. So baking is going to be an example of a chemical change. All right, mowing the lawn. All we're doing when we mow the lawn is cutting the grass into smaller pieces. So that's going to be a physical change. Fireworks I already mentioned. That heat and light that is produced is an indication that we have a chemical change. And digestion of food, all right? The food, once it goes into our bodies, turns into different chemicals. We turn it into energy or fat or whatever within our bodies. And so that, again, is a chemical change. All right, so now I'm going to give you a few indications to tell you or help you figure out whether a chemical change is happening or not. So there are 4 indications that you can see with your eyes that tell you if a chemical change is happening. The first is formation of a gas or bubbles. The second is a change in color. The third is formation of a solid, which is usually a precipitate. We'll talk about what that means in a minute. And then the last one is production of heat, which is usually seen as a light or sometimes as a flame, or absorption of heat. So basically a temperature change that happens as a result of our reaction. Okay, so now let's look at a couple of examples of chemical changes, and you'll see that for most of these you get more than one indication of a chemical reaction. So if iron rusts, we definitely see a change in color. All right. And also because the iron is combining with oxygen from the air, we're forming a new solid. That one's a little harder to see because it doesn't look like the solid gets any bigger than it was, but both of those things are happening. Burning wood. All right. We definitely get a color change when that happens. New gases are formed, although you can't see them as well because there's not bubbles in the same way that there would be if we had a liquid reaction. And we definitely produce heat and light. Okay, so lots of ways to tell that burning is a chemical change. Metabolism. This is basically digestion of your food. All right, your food, if you imagine it going through your body, lots of different steps happen. Sometimes we form a gas. All right, the color of the food after you've digested it is definitely different. It's hard to say that we formed a solid because most of our food is solid going in. And temperature changes probably do happen, but it's inside our body, so not as easy to witness. All right. Electroplating. This is basically when we take ions from a solution and plate them onto a metal. All right, so when we do that, we are forming a new solid, and we're also changing the color most of the time. So this could be like plating copper onto iron, for example. So it would change from a dark color of the iron to that coppery orange color. All right, rotting food, that is mostly just a change in color is what we can see when that happens. If we mix vinegar and baking soda, we definitely form a gas, right? You see lots of bubbles when that reaction happens. All right, cooking an egg. All right, when we cook an egg, we make a new solid, right? Our eggs start out liquid and they are solid by the time we're done cooking. The color changes, all right? And sometimes when we think about cooking, students mistakenly think that we're producing heat. We're not. We're adding heat to make that happen, so that one's not applicable here. Baking a cake, again, we're adding heat, but there's no indication that the temperature changes because of the baking itself. But we do form a gas. That's why our baked goods get bigger, because the gas is formed and we have air bubbles in there. And the color definitely changes. And we also have solids at the end where we started with liquid. All right, fireworks. There could be a change in color with fireworks, and then we also definitely get lots of light when fireworks happen. Okay, and then a battery. This one is harder to see because it happens within the battery cell itself. But when batteries power something, the electrons are moving from one side to the other, all right, and that produces energy, which goes into the category of producing heat, all right? So those are your indications. We're going to take a look at these in the lab as well, and hopefully that'll help you determine whether things are chemical changes or physical changes.